In this lesson, we will dig deeper into the nature and logic of globalization using the example of a seemingly very simple commodity, the tennis ball. Tennis balls are soft and cute and good not only for tennis, but for dog play and for walkers for people with disabilities. But inside this fuzzy fluorescent rubber ball is the fascinating story of high-tech mechanization, international wage competition, sweatshop working conditions, complex networks of global outsourcing, and heavy reliance on international shipping containers and associated logistics, intense branding and marketing efforts, and high-stakes corporate financial dealings across international borders involving mergers and acquisitions, private equity, and tax havens. Hard to believe, but the tennis ball tells the fascinating story of late 20th and 21st century globalization. Before we get into the story of the tennis ball, I want you to be aware that we can learn a lot about the world and the dynamics of the global economy by thinking about individual goods, their production and sales, and the market and non-market dynamics involved. In his famous book, Capital, written in 1857, economist Karl Marx signaled this by introducing the concept of the fetishism of the commodity. Marx warned his readers that rather than focus simply on the market price for a good, to look inside the commodity, to see the social relations it reveals. Here is some of his 19th century prose. A commodity appears at first sight as an extremely obvious, trivial thing, but its analysis brings out that it is a very strange thing, abounding in metaphysical subtleties and theological niceties. The mysterious character of the commodity form consists, therefore, simply in the fact that the commodity reflects the social characteristics of men's own labor. This fetishism of commodity arises from the peculiar social character of the labor which produces them. If we can get past Marx's use of the word men's when he means people's, and his use of the British spelling of the word labor, we can appreciate that his reference to the peculiar social character of the labor is about the market and non-market power relationships that go into organizing production in a given society. By looking inside a commodity, we can explore the specifics of these power relations. Now back to the tennis ball. The modern tennis ball came into being in the late 19th century. Before that, balls were made with leather and stuffed with wool or animal hair. In the 1880s, the Germans invented a process for vulcanizing rubber balls, and the British imported these balls and began covering them in wool felt. It wasn't until after World War II that the pressurized can was invented, which preserved balls as new until the can was open. If the modern ball came into being as the result of technological change, rubber vulcanization, its role in the process of globalization today was also underpinned by the invention of new technology. This was the machinery required for mass production. The process is now highly mechanized and requires very little labor. In reality, the move of production from the US to East Asia was the result of a number of factors, including mechanization, shipping technology, corporate strategy, and corporate finance. The tennis ball is a good example of a global network of production, trade, and assembly, what we called a global value chain. The seemingly simple tennis ball, in fact, contains over 20 input materials and parts from more than 10 different countries. A study of the Schlosinger tennis ball, used at Wimbledon, done by Mark Johnson at Warwick Business School, found that these materials and parts are sourced from 10 different countries, and these inputs travel a total of over 50,000 miles to get a can of tennis balls delivered to the tournament. Included in this list of inputs, wool from New Zealand that is processed in the United Kingdom, rubber from Malaysia and the Philippines that is molded into the core of the ball, glue from the Philippines, and grease required to create a rubber core, and a perfectly fitting felt cover, able to sustain forces driving it at well over 100 miles an hour. In addition, there are raw materials and chemicals required for each of these, including clay from the US, silica from Greece, sulfur from Korea, magnesium carbonate from Japan, and zinc oxide from Thailand. To get a sense of the automation of the process, take a look at this video of a Penn tennis ball factory in Thailand. The simple, round, fuzzy ball is a prime example of two of the most important features of competition in the modern age: price competition and technological competition. The competitive drive is both to raise quality and to reduce costs by producing at huge scale and to minimize labor costs to the extent possible. Mechanization thus promotes outsourcing. Once a production process is mechanized, the labor required in the process becomes very standardized. There's the need to run the machines and to complement the work of the machines. Thus, although mechanization reduces the labor required in the production of each ball on average, it is the standardization of the technology that also makes it possible to relocate production to where labor costs are low. The story of the tennis ball is also a good example of how corporate financial considerations have implications for the winners and losers of globalization. Take the Wilson Sporting Goods Company, which produces the tennis ball used in the US Open every year. Wilson produces a long line of high-quality sporting equipment, and the tennis balls are just one product in this line. Wilson was founded in 1913 as the Ashland Manufacturing Company and is still based in Chicago, Illinois. But the company has been bought and sold 4 times over the past 60 years, most recently by Mascot Bidco Oy, which is financed almost entirely by Chinese investors, but is incorporated in the Cayman Islands, one of the world's most famous tax havens. The example of Wilson Incorporated thus shows how globalization involves both production and finance, and how there are winners and losers as a result. There are 2 big stories here. One is that globalization's winners and losers are not necessarily best viewed as countries. This is how US politicians have set up the problem. America should be winning. America should not get ripped off in its trade deal with Mexico and Canada. America should be tough on China. These proclamations presume that America is a monolith and China or Mexico, Canada, Europe, another monolith. But there are winners and losers within each country as well. The second big story is the rise in importance of finance relative to the real economy. The tennis ball may be designed in Chicago, manufactured in Thailand or the Philippines, and shipped from Indonesia, but its profits are now the earnings of a Chinese holding company called Mascot Bidco Oy, based in the Cayman Islands, where profits go tax-free. Behind all of this is the prominent role of corporate conglomeration and private equity firms that have gobbled up brand manufacturers, internationalized the distribution of profits, and introduced a shell game for collecting corporate taxes. The tennis ball allows us to remove the veil over the process by which value is created and distributed in the 21st century. That is, how profits and wages are earned, how social class is determined, and how economies become industrialized or deindustrialized. Because tennis balls have a shorter life than most balls, they also reveal the ecological challenge posed by the mass consumption of disposable products. Politicians speak of globalization from the perspective of jobs. Corporate managers see globalization from the perspective of profits. The location of the two have become disconnected. Globalization has meant that value is increasingly produced outside of where it was being consumed. Financialization has meant that value is increasingly going to owners of the company rather than its workers. Where do the profits go in the globalization of production? The answer to this question is not just to understand where the jobs go. The real answer is follow the money. The globalization debate often focuses so much on employment impacts and ignores the impact on profits and taxes. We often ignore the last two when we discuss the impact of globalization. So the globalization of the tennis ball is a story of complex financial dealings that lead to a shift in the flow of profits from Chicago to Beijing. Along the way, the taxes collected from such economic activity have also shifted out of the United States. On a final note, today over 300 million tennis balls are sold each year around the world. Over 100 million of those in the US. And in the US, over 100 million balls are disposed of in landfills. By one estimate, these balls take 450 years to decompose. So the tennis ball also presents a major issue of environmental sustainability. In this lesson, you've learned about how commodities reveal social relations and viewed the consequences of globalization through the case study of the tennis ball. In the final module, we will get a chance to discuss further the question of how the rules of global economic engagement might be rethought so that globalization could serve the interests of more people, more working people, who have been so buffeted by the forces of hyperglobalization.